I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin and Dave, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today we are joined by Dave. It's audio.
I know it's audio. I thought you were going to continue to go.
For those of you listening, he waved at the camera. So Dave is a 22-year firefighting veteran from a suburban fire department north of Boston here in Massachusetts. And he's been on for approximately 22 years.
22 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for popping over, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
Join us. So obviously we are here to talk about your experience in the first responder realm as a firefighter, and also the mental health aspects and challenges that come along with those kind of roles.
Yes.
So first of all, basically just take us through your experience. How old were you when you joined the fire department?
So I started late. I was 30 when I started. I had worked for Verizon for a number of years before, and it was funny when I had the chance to join the fire department. Mm-hmm. It was I was making some pretty good money for Verizon, and was it the right thing to do? I have a young family, and the pay cut was
significant.
Yeah, but I like new stuff. I like I don't want to say action, because after 22 years, there's a different way than you think it's going to be.
There's
when
a
you
different
first
viewpoint
start.
of the
absolutely.
action.
But I do like something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is ever the same.
Yeah.
And you get to help people, and helping people kind of helps me, and I like that.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. So what was the process like for you, like the application process, and how long that take, and
So we had to take a civil service exam for the state of Massachusetts. I did that, did pretty well on it. Mm-hmm. And at the time I had lived in the town that I became a firefighter.
Okay.
Because you do need town precedence. It puts you higher on the list than anybody else. So if you live in another town, you kind of put behind everybody that's from that specific town.
I think that's the same for, like, I live in Cambridge.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a similar kind of thing, like living in the city's quite.
Yeah. And, and I didn't live there. Like, I grew up in a different town, but I had moved in with a girlfriend at the time. We'd lived together for a couple of years, which is why I ended up in this nice little suburb north of Boston.
Yeah. And you're still there? You've stayed with the same fire department the whole time?
Oh yeah, I stayed there. I love it.
Yeah.
This is like my town now.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. And so you said that you sat like the civil servants test to be able to like be eligible to get on.
Yep. So you do that, and then you do a physical exam, and you have to pass all those qualifications. And the process probably took, from the time I got the letter saying that I was going to be interviewed and all that, good 8 months, maybe even more than a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And was Verizon aware? Were they?
I did tell my boss at the time, but I didn't want to come off like I was going to take it. I really was kind of in between on what I wanted to do. I kind of tried to figure it out. But ultimately, I told him, like, no, dude, I'm leaving.
Yeah. No, because like I remember when I was going through my application to join the police force back in Australia, there were people who had bosses who didn't know, and so it made it really challenging, because you had to like take days off work and go and do this and go and do that. So if you had like an employer that was supportive of that process, I think it definitely makes it easier.
It does. I'll tell you, one mistake I did make is I didn't really tell him that I was as interested as I was. And the deputy of my department was calling just because he had to call to make sure that my background was good. Yeah. And this dude wasn't calling him back. And I finally got a call from the deputy saying, "Hey,
do you work there?"
Right. Look, I believe that you work there, but I haven't gotten a call back, and I've called several times now. So I was going up and down the guy. Call him right now and sit next to you while you do it. And then that was a given. I was leaving from that point on.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, and so in Massachusetts, I know that the Fire Academy is out in Stowe.
Yeah.
Is that where like everyone goes?
No, Boston has their own
okay.
Stowe, and I think there's talk of putting another one somewhere, but most of us go to Stowe.
Okay. And then how long do you spend at the academy?
It's funny. It's gone from, I think they went down as low as 8 weeks at one point, and up to 12 weeks, okay. 13 weeks. When I did it, I did 11.
Yeah.
But it's changed. It's gone back and forth since then. It's been 20 something years. So,
yeah.
To me, I think that 11-week is probably good. They can condense some things.
Yeah.
But firefighting has changed, I feel, so much in the past 20 years that everything they're doing is helpful, and the longer they can be there, the better. Probably.
Yeah. And so do they do it sort of like since then and to now? Do they do it so like you're there for a bit and then they go to a station and learn a little bit and then go back, or is it all just like boom, one hit at the academy and then they're at a station?
It is all at the academy. You're talking about when they're doing their academy time is all at the academy.
Yeah.
So some towns, they'll hire their guys first, and we've had guys who've worked for us in the past for over a year before they got to the academy.
Oh, so right. What do they do?
Well, before we used to put them on the trucks and just kind of
teach them on the job.
Yeah, teach them on the job, learn as you go. Now we don't do that. Now we run an ambulance, or 2 ambulances in town.
Okay.
So if you haven't gone to the academy, you're going to be on that ambulance every time you come in, which to me is a way better way of doing it.
So then is it a prerequisite that you're a medic before you apply?
And that will depend on your town. Our town, yes, it is a prerequisite. You have to be EMT basic. Okay. You don't have to be a medic or a paramedic.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I know that there's a delineation, and I use the wrong language.
So there's reasons why we did it. We had people in the past who we'd hire, and you spend all this money trying to train this guy, and a year later they don't pass their EMT, and it's like you've invested so much into this kid or person, and now we gotta let them go. And it's sad. You hate to see it, but it just made it easier, I'm sure, for the chiefs at the time to say, look, you have to be an EMT.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they could go through the process of like reimbursing them for it or something like that. But it's if that's like that basic core level of what you need, and then in hindsight, if you're putting all this money into them and then they can't pass it, would be frustrating.
I have to admit though, like when I started, I wasn't an EMT, so I almost feel like two-faced saying it. Kind of
times change, Dave. It's okay.
Yeah, times do change.
No, but I mean, it's like I remember them telling us when I went through the police academy that it cost $100,000. Is
that right?
For each recruit or cadet or like whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Right, and then to see them get up and leave or not make it is. That's a lot for a town to expense.
So for us, it's like a state. So obviously, like the budget's a little bit different. But and then it was, and also back when I joined, people were lasting for so much longer, and then I'm one of those terrible people that left like right in the middle of my prime. But that's for another story.
I've heard that story. I think it's a courageous move to be able to leave everything behind and go to a whole nother country and make it, get married, have a family. Like that's hard to do.
I appreciate that. Yes, it's worked out well, and that's the reason I'm here and doing this and everything now. But I really loved my time as a cop and where I was working in a detective role. Like it was so amazing. But in hindsight, I wouldn't still be working in that place. Like having young family, it doesn't. As a female, having young family, incredibly challenging in that kind of dynamic position. So I got to do it at like the best part of my life when I was a lot younger and carefree, and even when I had a partner, he was over here and I was over there. So I was a very good wing woman, though.
You're a good wing girl.
Yes, I was, because
you hooked up all the fellas.
Well, yes, but no, but like because like my partner was living obviously overseas, so I'd be happy to go out like I was single, but as in just being a good wing woman was a nice thing to do.
It's always a nice thing to do. I gotta ask, you have to miss it though. You must miss it. I mean, you have to look back and be like, oh man, that was fun, or that was.
Oh yeah, like I mean, there's there's elements that I definitely miss. And I think like how you were talking at the start, that how you liked going to work and the unpredictable nature of it, like that was something equally being a police officer or a firefighter. Like that is your job. You don't know whether you're gonna have like a really boring shift or and it's just like, or I'm just doing paperwork at my desk, or you like rock on in and I was working at a place called the Armed Crime Squad. So we investigated kidnappings, armed robberies, non-fatal shootings, and like aggravated burglary where there was like in nature, like someone had been severely assaulted or like a weapon used or something like that. So as you can imagine, you could just walk in and anything could be going on, or you get to the end of your shift and then it's like, no one's going home.
Right.
Yep. And
Mandoed.
yeah, and it could be, like a lot. I mean, most weeks it was sort of probably 70, 80 hours a week. You're doing like 16, 17-hour days, just day after day after day. So it was fun, but it was tiring. And again, like, yeah, if you have a family or like a young family like I do right now.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's going to be so difficult. Just from your perspective,
yeah.
Like you said, when you start having young kids, I know my wife, when we had our daughter, she was always been a worker, and a good worker.
She's a nurse, isn't she?
She's a nurse now, but back then she worked for a different telephone company.
Oh, okay.
And, we had our daughter, Mackenzie. She tried to go back to work, and she came back and said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. I was like, okay,
yeah,
I'll work more and you stay home. I'd rather have her, one of us raise a family. It's kind of what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that's very, very similar to sort of our family dynamics.
Yeah, I think it's important.
And it's like I could work, as in more of like a different capacity to what I do now in terms of running my own business, but like most of my paycheck would have gone to daycare. So it was like,
it's so hard to do these days though with the expense of everything. It's to only have one income earner. Yeah. It's challenging.
Yeah. Which is why you work overtime in the way that you do, and like many firefighters do, because it's either that or like get a second job and try to work it in, or it's
everyone finds their way.
Exactly. But no, like I miss like the work of being a police officer, and then sort of doing what I do with like coaching first responders, and even like doing this podcast. Like I felt like drawn back to that, that kind of community. But I think it's really just more the people. Like I miss some of the people. I mean, some of the people I don't miss. But a lot of them, exactly. But no, a lot of them I do. But then, so many of the people that became really important in my life, I mean, I'm still in contact with. I still see them every time I go home to Australia. Like I think if someone's important in your life, you make it work and maintain that level of contact no matter what. But yeah, definitely the camaraderie. Like I think if I go out like with some, my husband, either firefighter friends, like, or some of his military college friends are either current or former first responders, I just always find myself gravitating towards them.
Towards the people with the same background as you?
100%. I know, right? It's just, I was recording another episode with a couple of girls the other day, and we were talking about, like you go to a barbecue or a wedding or just like anything, and I think you just always find yourself gravitating towards those people
because you have that.
It's like a vibe. It's an energy. It's like
the similarities.
Yeah.
Probably the same type of humor,
always struggles. The same type of humor. Generally inappropriate, and a little bit on the darker side. But
super inappropriate.
That's how we
juvenile and a little dark.
Exactly.
But it works for us.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, and I don't know. I mean, you've obviously been doing it a hell of a lot longer than I have, but I always found that sense of humor, even though it's kind of universal, like it's one of the main reasons that we cope with what we do, we cope with what we see. I think being able to find humor in even something that might be a little bit awful, it kind of just, I don't know, makes it feel like a little bit lighter, I guess.
It makes it feel way lighter. Yeah. It certainly helps, especially with the fire department. Like we live together.
Yes.
I call it my second family, and you have your guys and girls that are on your unit or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
But you're kind of living with this family 2-3 times every week for 32 years.
Yeah, for better, for worse.
Yeah. Right. And you have all these calls in between that are quite terrible. It's usually somebody's worst day when you're going to their house. Like, it's not like everyone's super happy to see you. It's not the kids from the park who, see the fire truck and they're like, yeah. It's somebody's dad just had a heart attack and is dying. Yeah. Or, something,
a car accident,
terrible accident, whatever it is, it's their worst day in years, most likely. Yeah. But we're lucky, like we get to come back to the station and talk about it because we're so close and because we're a family. I'm not saying there are people you may not get along with, or other people you gravitate to, whatever. But if you come together as a unit, you can't help but talk about these things. And we have our coffee table. We come back and somebody will make a stupid joke. Yeah, something funny and dark, like you said. But it just helps and makes me wonder, like with cops, as you were one in Australia, and I got friends who are COs, and I got other friends, paramedics and nurses and all. Like, where do they get to unload that stuff? Yeah, because I can tell somebody, like, that kind of bothered me. Like, I didn't like that. Did you? And then they might have been reluctant to say it, but because we're all at the table and they see one of us, somebody comes out and says something, and then the next can follow, and we kind of just circle it around. What do you coppers do? Like, you don't have that coffee table. You don't.
I mean, so I think American policing is sort of pretty different than Australian policing. Like, we rarely worked one up. We were typically always two up, and then I think kind of part of the reason I loved being a detective so much was because you worked on a crew. So we had like a detective sergeant, and then there was sort of anywhere between like 4 to 6 detectives. Yeah. And so you were a crew, and then you would go out and do jobs together, or you would do jobs as a crew and all that kind of thing. And then if it was like a search warrant, you would partner up with like other crews and all that kind of thing. So we would have that kind of crew dynamic, which I think is something that I really valued. But yeah, equally, you were always just with someone else. And so you could generally have that kind of, well, I mean, in saying that, again, yeah, I didn't like everyone that I worked with, so it wasn't, and I'm sure many people didn't like me. So, but I think if it wasn't directly the person you worked with, you had your people at your station that you could go and like speak to about things. And
agreed, but the dynamic is different because we actually 100%. Go back and sit there and talk and have a cup of coffee and make food, get something to eat. Where you guys,
it's job to
job, and then you go off. Maybe you meet afterwards, and there's a group of you and you can talk about them. Yeah. Other times that stuff gets missed. Everybody has their own families that they go back to.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I used to watch this TV show called Rescue Me with the one with like Dennis Leary in it, and that was, I don't know if it was my husband or another firefighter had said, like, pretty much the only accurate thing about that TV show was those scenes around the firehouse kitchen table with everyone giving each other shit and all that kind of thing, that they said that was like the most accurate. And again, that is where people are sometimes through humor, like offloading all of their crap.
You better have thick skin.
Yeah.
And you better learn to laugh at yourself. Yeah. And whatever mannerisms you have that are awkward are going to be pointed out in your face every day until it doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah, I guess there's something, nothing gets better than through some like exposure therapy of like.
I love it. I think it's great.
I know, but yeah, I think having thick skin would definitely help.
You need it. People, yeah. I've seen some younger kids come in, or even older guys. You can always tell some guys can take it. Some people love to give other people shit, but then they can't take it. Yeah, return. It's like, what are you doing?
And you can't give it out and not take it back.
Right.
That's
important to be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah. And so
we all make mistakes. We all mess up. We all have to own something that maybe we don't want to.
Yeah. And so you were saying like that there's, a certain level of importance about being able to go back and talk about it. But I feel that, you've been in the job for 20 years. So, and you are a lieutenant, so you are in a position of leadership within your fire department. Like, is that sort of something that you try to like have as like a cultural thing within your station or within your crew? Or like, I guess, you know, how is it now as opposed to like being able to kind of talk about something that bothered you 20 years ago when you joined?
So I would say when I joined, and probably up until maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I would just hold that inside, and like most guys do, and a lot of women do, it's, you know, there's a alpha male kind of thing going on in these line of work. And I don't know, just kind of how I was brought up.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to burden somebody with my problems.
Yeah.
So, you know, just kind of let it sink in and deal with it.
And
not exactly healthy.
No. So, okay. So, and I do want to get to how you were brought up, because I think that would have some kind of like an impact. But, so what changed? You're saying like it's about 10 years ago.
I would say experiences change. I'm older now. I have my own family, kids who have grown up. Mm-hmm. And just seeing other people go through things and going through things yourself. Like, you know, I struggled with a ton of different things, mm-hmm. where if I had just brought it up, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad.
Okay.
And, you know, so then it takes years to get past or get through. And now I look back and I'm like, well, I don't want somebody else to have to be like that. So if, as a lieutenant or a leader, you know, I like to bring stuff up and like, hey, this bothered me. You know, I've been on for 20 something years. If it's bothering me, I bet it's bothering you. And even if it's not, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I just, like I said, that coffee table talk, those stupid little dark humor jokes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reality around that stuff.
Yeah.
That can, I don't know, kind of maneuver you into a new direct area, mm-hmm. where guys or girls can see that, you know, it's not wrong to feel these things.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think that's remarkably progressive.
I don't know if it's progressive. It just, I don't want people to go through it.
I'm not in like but I think progressive in the first responder realm, because equally someone of your vintage and of your experience could be the complete like polar opposite and just be like, oh, I fucking got through it, you can get through it too. Like,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it was.
Yeah.
I'm trying not that I'm trying to change that, but I just see it different. I see it way different. I was like that for a long time, but not anymore.
But that is also something I think that's like super common too. There's like a lot of people who are on the job for a long time seem to just have like a real turning point. And sometimes it is something that's gotten to them, or it's just their attitude has like adjusted over time. But, you know,
well, you got to remember too, when people first start, they don't know anybody and they're young. So you get a guy or a girl who's in their young, you know, early 20s, mid 20s, mm-hmm. late 20s. They're still trying to prove themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and how do you prove yourself? Well, you have to be strong. You have to, you know, resilient.
Show no weakness.
Absolutely show no weakness. And, you know, I don't mind vulnerabilities because I know how people think and I know how I think. So because now I'm past that, I guess, mm-hmm. I can look back and like, well, you know, you don't have to be that way. Or if you want to be that way, that's fine. But if you need to talk about something, come to me, which I've been lucky enough to have people, you know, come to me with different things. And, mm-hmm. you know, whether you help or not, you can always try.
Yeah. And do you find that like the people in your firehouse or in your crew are sort of receptive if like when you are sitting down and talking about it, and if like you're the one to kind of bring it up, like do you feel like that's working for your crew?
I've seen relief in people's faces before.
Okay.
Like if I bring something up and almost like that. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think it helps, and it has to help.
Yeah.
You know, if I was sitting 15 years ago and an older guy who I respected was like, hey dude, this is some terrible stuff that just happened and it makes me feel, you know, like however, or mm-hmm. I had this call years ago and it bothered me for 10 years.
Yeah.
Here are certain ways to get over that. Like, what do you do that helps you mentally and, you know, to get over some of these bad thoughts that you might have or things that reoccur?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. Yeah. It does. And so I guess you have like told me offline about the fact that you have some first responders in your family.
Yeah, so my father was a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
I had an uncle who was a police officer. I have another uncle who was a lieutenant in another town or city.
As in a fire department, or
yep, fire department.
Okay.
Mother's a nurse, sister's nurse. My other,
I didn't realize it was that extensive.
And my wife's a nurse.
Wow, so your whole realm is like populated by that.
It really is. I guess we all kind of grouped together.
I just all I think you told me about was the your dad and your uncle. So
yeah.
So how did that shape you, like, growing up? You know, like having a dad who did a first responder role and maybe wasn't around a lot, or had sort of those varying shifts and all that kind of thing.
I would say in a good way. I mean, I remember being a kid and my father having, his friends over there, obviously all other cops. And, you think now that I thought they were so old then, but they were just kids themselves having fun and doing whatever.
Yeah.
But it kind of changed. So when I was 12 years old, I think I was 12, my father was in a fight and then got hit by a drunk driver. So the fight spilled out into the street and a drunk driver hit him. So he almost died, and he was in the hospital for weeks.
How old were you, 12?
I think I was 12. I might have been a little younger than that. Maybe I was 11 or 10. But, little memories, those traumatic things.
Yeah.
I remember being real young and laying in my bed, and I could smell cigarette smoke. And I knew it was my grandmother. And I knew something was wrong. Like, just laying in bed. It's funny, I haven't thought about that in, oh my God, centuries.
This is what the Rorschach room is for.
Yeah.
Wow, that's, I mean, did he have like long-standing injuries as a result of that?
Yeah, he had to end up retiring, so he really only did 10 years.
Oh shit!
But he's a smart dude. He became an English teacher, then he became a chief for a what's it called? A veterans place.
Oh, okay. Like a veterans organization.
Yeah,
type of thing?
Yeah. Like he's a smart. He's the Jeopardy guy who answers all the questions right down. You're just like, how do you know this?
So was he a veteran, or just because
he was a veteran? Yeah.
Okay.
He fought in Vietnam War. He was a forward observer. He's got some decent stories that he doesn't talk about it a lot, but when he does,
yeah, but they're heavy.
They are.
All right, so I do need to ask a very important question.
What do you got?
So your dad was a copper, your uncle's a firefighter. What made you go in one direction over another? And was your dad super pissed that you became a firefighter over a cop?
No, he wasn't. He was excited.
Yeah.
He was very, well, it's, cops always say, oh, I should have been a fireman, and firemen say, yeah, maybe.
I can't say I ever hear about the opposite way. I never hear about a firefighter wanting to be a cop, and that gets rubbed in our noses quite frequently. Like my husband works with a guy who was a Cambridge cop and is now a Cambridge firefighter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then when I was back home, I know of, I want to say at least 2 or 3 who were coppers, like easily over like 10 years, and then just
switched over. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I don't know what like the policing law is here, but like back home, the paperwork was fucking excessive, and it was like the bane of your existence as a police officer was like all of the paperwork you had to do. And that was always like, I ran into one of them. Actually, he came over here. He was traveling with a mate who I also used to work in crime with, and we met up in Boston and went and drank at Cheers and had a blast. It was great to actually see them. But yeah, he was just like, no fucking paperwork, just like lives the dream. And back home, like a lot of firefighters are tradies. So
same here.
Yeah, so he was a plumber. So he had like his complete side gig, and he would do they do differing shifts to what seemingly American firefighters do, or maybe you guys used to do in the past. They would do 2 days, 2 nights, 4 days off.
Yeah, so we used to do 10s and 14s, 2 10-hour days followed by 2 14-hour nights, and then you'd have 4 days off.
Yeah.
So
I think that's kind of
12 and 12. Some people do 12 and 12.
I think, well, so the only reason I really know mostly is because my girlfriend used to be so in Australia we call triple O as opposed to 911.
Mm-hmm.
She was a triple O call taker and dispatcher for the firefighters and the AMBOs. And so she would do the same shifts as them. So I feel like it was 2 12s, 2 14s, and then something like that.
2 12s and 2 12s.
I said 2 12s and 2 14s.
Yeah, but
oh no, that doesn't make sense.
Right, but that's okay.
Maths isn't.
We can edit that one out.
Shut up, Dave.
Like you said,
you can leave now.
You have to have thick skin.
Mm-hmm.
And because you were a copper back in Australia, I'm assuming you can handle a little bit of this.
Oh, you know what I can? I'll just throw some choice swear words at you and
Yes.
we'll be fine.
Nobody swears like Australians.
And you've really learned that the hard way, haven't you? All right. So
why don't we talk about how we met? Because we met at the Critical Incident Stress Management.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, you were going to get to that? Okay. So
just throw a complete spanner in my interview. That's fine.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
You want me to go?
Well, the only thing I was going to ask you about was how long into your career did you become a lieutenant?
Oh, I waited way too long, and I should have went earlier. But I was maybe 14 years, 13 or 14 years. So I was on an ambulance for 12, and you get to be on the engine on the ladder also. But primarily, most of my job was 2 out of 3 days or shifts would be on the ambulance, and I did that for 12 years, maybe 13. That was a long time.
I was going to say, yeah.
So I should have taken it early, but I didn't. And I never actually thought to. I was doing other things back then too. Like, I had other interests.
Other side gigs and...
Side gigs, work. I've always liked playing sports. So I played football till I was like 33 years old. Mm-hmm. Softball teams, golf, volleyball team.
Wow.
All sorts of fun things. So I guess I didn't really get into the work until after that.
Yeah, and also your kids were probably a fair bit younger back then too, so it would have...
They were, but that firefighter schedule, the 24 hours, it was awesome because I get to see, like my son played all sorts of sports in high school, so I get to see everything.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So it's a good schedule.
Yeah, and I think that is, such a draw card for a lot of people is that lifestyle aspect of you kind of get 3 days worth of work just like done and dusted in one day, and then you have like primarily the rest of your week to go.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
That's good. How do you find it now that you've, like you're saying, you've been on for 20 years? Like, do you still weather the nights as easily as you feel like you used to?
No, I don't. It used to be easy, and then the next day I could get up and work and do whatever. But it just seems like the last couple of years, or maybe just even the last year since I've turned 50, sometimes those nights they get to you. And, I'm kind of dragging ass the whole next day. I want to take a nap.
That's all right. Well, at least as a firefighter, you generally have the opportunity to take a nap
now and then. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised.
And so you mentioned playing football and obviously a lot of other like team sports. Is that sort of, I guess, dynamic or environment like important to you, and something that I guess you try to like foster with your crew at work? Like,
absolutely. I think they go hand in hand. It's, you play sports, you're in teams, the locker room humor, or you go to college and you're on a frat, that type of humor and that type of silliness and all that stuff. But people work together, and when you're working together for a certain goal, it's easy when everybody has their thing to do, their part in it.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like 10 different individuals, or say football, 11 different individuals. If you can work as a team, you're always better.
Yeah.
And for the fire department, I think it goes.
I was gonna say, I think
it's almost exactly the same way. You have to work together. You have to get along. You learn each and everybody's strengths, and it works better. It works better for everybody, for the people you're trying to help, for yourselves.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So would you sort of like almost see yourself a little more as like a coach as opposed to like a lieutenant? Like is that kind of almost like the mindset that you have sometimes when it comes to...
No, but I'm sure some guys do, and that's not a bad way to look at it, as you're a coach for a team. But I actually don't look at it that way. I look at it, I go to work with my friends.
Yeah.
And sure, I get to make the call on a lot of stuff. They have to come to me for for that stuff. But outside of those calls where, it's
Yeah.
They make the call. What do you want to do today?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
We kind of work off of each other.
Yeah. And I think you were telling me not long ago that now you've got some new like trainees at your station.
Yep, we hired 2 new guys, and they came to my shift, and
so now that all of their entire like fire education is now on you.
Not most of it, yeah, it is, which is fine, but it's small steps, it's baby steps. They haven't been to the academy yet. They're going.
Oh, okay.
They're going next month.
Yep.
And so they're not allowed on the trucks. We can't bring them into a house. Look, we don't get fires like some of these cities and towns do, which is a great thing. I hate having to go to a place and somebody's home is ruined.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
The whole life and memories and stuff.
But there's so many different things that happen. Like we have 30,000 residents or more. Okay. And we have 5 nursing homes. You have the high schools, the middle schools. You have all these different businesses in between. And you can't imagine how many different things happen. Like you wouldn't expect it, but it happens in these towns too.
Oh yeah, 100%. No,
over and over again for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I think it's definitely very different to sort of like the fire departments back home. But as well though, like what I always find really interesting, like the American first responder emergency services, like each sort of city has its own little thing, like here and there. Like we actually bumped into a Beverly fire captain last weekend, and I was talking to him, and then my husband came up and was talking to him, and he was like, "Oh, I work for Cambridge," and he was like, "You keep stealing our people."
Everyone wants to go to Cambridge.
Evidently, I don't know. But yeah, so it was kind of like funny in that sense. But so back home, we just have like a state police force and a federal police force, and we have like it's called the MFB, so the Metropolitan Fire Brigade. So they are basically, metropolitan Melbourne, which is like the capital city where I'm from. And that extends out, depending on which direction you go, sort of maybe 40, 50 kilometers. I could be way off. But then once you reach like a certain point, then it turns into the CFA, which is the Country Fire Authority, because when you get out that further, it's like a lot more rural. So a lot of the times they'll either have they have some paid positions, but then they have a lot of like volunteers and stuff out that way. Whereas here it's just, and it does make it seem like you guys would always just be either fighting for troops or fighting for money or whatever, because it's like each little city has its own one. And I just wonder whether, if it would be too difficult to have like all one just in one state, or I guess then
different states do that in the country.
They do.
Yeah.
Okay.
More like a metropolitan or a SOAP.
Okay.
Yeah. But just not here in Mass.
I was going to say no. Yeah. So maybe because my experience is just very much Massachusetts. So
I tend to like it this way. It breaks up each town and city. They know. Look, when you grow up in a town, you know that town pretty well. Yeah. Like I didn't grow up in North, and I didn't grow up where I went, where I work, but the guys that have, they're such a resource for things. Yeah. Like we have a call at this, I grew up with Johnny who lived on, next door to the street. Or,
or I know this is like a one way, so we'll take like the next, that kind of knowledge is.
Maybe somebody drowned and it's like, I know how to get there. Let's go through this. It's faster. There's a lot of little.
That local knowledge is very important.
It's huge.
And especially when, you're in like a position where it's like time is an issue and a factor. No, that makes complete sense. So, no, and even like I think my hubby has told me about the bloke that he works with who was a copper and is now a firey. Like he's like, he knows shit. He knows like where to get the keys to do this and do that. And there's like that kind of that local knowledge that I think it's just worth its weight in gold.
It certainly is.
And so I want to sort of pivot to talking about like mental health in the fire department sort of overall. And I know we sort of like touched on it a little bit, and you were very open and honest about like the way that you kind of handle it with your crew and all that kind of thing, which I appreciate. What was ever sort of discussed either like when you joined or when you were in the academy or anything like that? Was anything ever, and I know we're talking 20 years ago, so times have changed, but was anything ever like addressed about you're going to see some really fucked up shit? These are your options, or this is what we do, or
no, not back then, not that I remember, and maybe I forgot, but if they did touch on it, it was probably a 1 hour thing or less.
Or and it was like 5 minutes before lunch, and you're not really paying attention.
But I honestly, I mean, you have to assume that this stuff, I think, when you get into this job, and like at my town, I worked for a little bit before I went to the academy. Okay. So you talk to those guys, and you go on calls, and whether they use you for certain things. Back then, they used us no matter what.
Yeah.
So you just kind of,
grin and bear it.
Yeah. Learn as you go.
Yeah.
I think they do bring it up a little bit in the academy now. Mm-hmm. It's not as prevalent as it should be. But there are other guys who know what to do or can send you in the right direction. Yeah.
And so for your particular fire department that you're aware of, is there like a specific, say, therapist that if someone is identified as, or they identify themselves and go like, I'm struggling, or if they're, having some like suicidal ideation or anything like that, is there I guess like a channel or an avenue that you guys are easily aware of to be able to attack that?
There is, like we have that on-site academy. I think we talked about it in the CISM class, where guys can go, and we've had a couple who have actually used it.
Oh, is that, it's like some
it's
like a retreat, not like a retreat.
Not a retreat, but they'll go for a week or so, and they can talk to other people. And
yeah, a lot of people talked about that, but I hadn't heard of it before.
So I got to be honest, I didn't know anything about it until pretty recently, and now after talking to a number of people who've gone to it, I can't believe how helpful it was for them. And they all say the same, or at least everybody I've talked to would say it's fantastic. And, they've made me think in a different way that I hadn't thought of before. Or I learned how to, deal with my
process.
Yeah. So it's super important. I mean, we don't have enough of it. Like I said, it's it's an alpha male, female job. We don't complain about stuff. Well, maybe we complain, but we don't let people know
in a different, or you might complain about things, but not necessarily like how you're feeling, and your emotions wouldn't be brought into it.
Yeah, well, look, you still have to prove yourself on a daily basis, I think.
Yeah.
And we have to rely on each other, and you start seeing some weaknesses in people. This is not how I feel. This is how I think other people, or maybe I felt this way when I was younger.
Yeah.
You start seeing some weaknesses in people, and and then you start thinking, well, can I trust them and all that? So there's a lot of hidden emotions, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell people my problems.
Yeah.
When people come to me with their problems, I'm the one who fixes the problems. I don't go to anybody else, and I'm not the only one who thinks that way. Most of us think that way.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell somebody. When we had that CISM class, I spoke because I wanted to be real with it. I really did want to learn. And one of the best things I thought they did was they made you talk about a problem that you had.
Yeah.
And I spoke of a couple of things that I had never mentioned. I hadn't spoken out loud to anybody.
Yep.
And it is kind of powerful to be able to unleash that, or, just get it off your chest.
Yeah.
I think I'm rambling a little bit, but.
No, you're not in the slightest.
Yeah. Well, if more people understood that and knew it and felt how that was, because, I can now picture somebody else coming to me and look, you can see, and I've been in this position plenty of times where somebody comes to you and something's wrong.
Yeah.
You can see it, and you've probably been seeing it for weeks.
Yeah.
You're like, this kid's just off.
Yeah.
And then they come to you and you're like, oh, okay, this is why. All right. Well, now we can, now that you told me, we can kind of maneuver ourselves into a better position for you to heal or whatever. Yeah.
No, and I mean, and I think that is important, because like you're saying, you spend so much time with your crew and with your people, and I know it sort of happened not on my husband's current crew, but like a previous one. Like someone was just, it was so evident something was wrong, something was going on, and he came home and he like mentioned it to me like a few times, like, oh, this person's fucking, and like more just very like came across as very moody and was kind of rubbing people on their crew like up the wrong way or whatever, and I just fucking said to him, I'm like, well, have you asked him what the matter is? Like, or what's going on? And he was like, oh, no. You know? And I'm like, well, you're his lieutenant. I'm like, fucking ask him. Like, hello?
Well, in his defense, you can ask people and they're going to shut you out.
Oh, 100%.
And
But,
that happens a ton.
But at least I, like, from my perspective, I was like, at least instead of just like, I look at it like, if someone's being a dick, generally it's for a reason. Like, unless that's just their personality and that's how they are all the time. But this person isn't like that all the time. They're like a ripping bloke. So I was just like, just ask him, or at least just be like, hey, I've noticed, like, you know, you seem a bit out of sorts. If you need to talk to me about something, I'm here.
Those are hard.
Yeah.
Hard things to talk about sometimes.
I know.
I know it well, and you know, at times it goes good. At times it doesn't. Like I have a guy who's awesome, love him. The past couple of years, man, the most negative person I've ever met, to the point where we don't even talk now. We've gone out to breakfast, like, dude, what's going on here?
Yeah.
But I get nothing. So at what point do you sit there and say, all right, he doesn't need the help, or he doesn't want it, but man, you know something's wrong.
I know, but I think at least if you just show that amount of effort, that interest, that consideration, that compassion, and I know for blokes it can be a little bit more difficult, but my husband, and I'm not claiming credit or anything like that, because I'm sure he would have come to it on his own, but like he, you know, went and had a word to that person, like next time they were on shift, and they like opened up to him and told him what was going on. And
best case scenario, that's awesome.
Yeah,
when that happens.
Yeah.
It's difficult when it doesn't happen,
of course,
because then it goes and it lingers, and it's like, you know, weeks and then months, and you're like, man, what? You know, and you try to get through, and nothing you can do gets through to them, and then it bothers you. You know, it's
look, and I'm not sitting here trying to be like I know better or anything like that at all, but I think that we can be stoic and we can be resilient and all that kind of thing, but I think showing someone compassion, I think, is one of the loveliest things we can do, because especially if they're coming at you with aggression or, you know, just dickish behavior, generally that's like they're projecting, because there is something either going on internally or something going on at home or whatever else. So instead of meeting them with where they're at, I just think there's a lot of power and a lot of kindness in just kind of recognizing that and just trying to like lower the temperature by offering compassion and empathy instead. And I know sometimes that's can be challenging.
No, I agree completely. It's just everyone's different. Personalities are different. I find that, you know, we call each other out sometimes, and there's always somebody trying to one up the other person on, you know, a statement or a joke or whatever. When it comes to things like this, I find it best to pull somebody aside and not do it obviously in front of anybody.
Yeah, of course.
You know, like you got to pull them in the office, or you're out on the apparatus floor and it's just the two of you. Like, come on, dude, what's going on here?
Yeah.
You know, that I agree with you.
Yeah. Or just,
and you learn more, I think, from that than from, you know, calling somebody out.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing exactly what I'm saying. You're just phrasing it differently.
Is that what it is? This is the American version.
You dick. And I guess, so then you being a supervisor, how do you sort of, I guess, try to handle it if someone came to you saying that they were struggling? Like, do you try to, I mean, I think from everything that you said, that like the round table thing, you try to be like proactive in that sense, which sounds wonderful. You know, but so say like you just had like that interaction like we were talking about just now, and someone opened up to you, like how do I handle that? Yes, thank you. I could not get that sentence out for some reason.
That's okay. I handle it privately. I call them in and we talk, and you know, there are things that are said that obviously you can't tell other people, so you have to be confidential. it's a lot of times it's just bringing them in and having them get it off their chest. It's something that's been bothering them or is bothering them. They need help. Like if it's a drug thing or an alcohol thing, yes, there are avenues we can point them in and direct them to and get them help. That's every time. Yeah. It's not always that easy to figure out. Yeah. Sometimes it's family stuff.
I was going to say, isn't it a lot of I feel like marital issues would be sort of pretty common.
But you come in for a week or two or something's not going right in life, whatever it is. You can kind of tell when you're the one who's off. And I feel like sometimes these these guys or girls will come in and be like, hey, and they'll just tell me. And it's like, okay, great. Like now I know. And now we can, whether you want my help or not. Yeah. At least I know, and you've got it off your chest. Mm-hmm. It's a little out in the open. Not everybody needs to know, but if there's something we can do to make it better, we can. Yeah. But it's just that conversation. Yeah. Usually it's just, that's all they need. Yeah. The majority of the time. Yeah.
Well, and I think as well, sort of, I think once someone gets to know you, you do come across in like a warm and like I would say like a comforting manner in terms of like, I think people would know that they would be able to come to you in that respect.
I hope so. I try to make it comfortable for everybody. I feel like I've been through a lot of this stuff myself, and I can understand a million different perspectives. Yeah. You tell me you think a certain way, I think about it myself, like, oh, I can see that. No matter what it is, usually. Yeah. And I think as well, like what would make it challenging being in that supervisory role is that the nature of, like you're saying, like what could actually be wrong with your troops? Like, is it a marital problem or like relationship breakdown? Is something wrong with their kid? Like, is it like trauma exposure from something you've seen at work? Like, it's such like, they're having financial problems. Are they drug and alcohol problems? Like, it's such a gambit. So like, I feel like you sort of would have to end up wearing so many different hats in terms of, being like a mini little counselor and, being a big brother and, all that kind of. Yes. Well, I've had all those things happen to me. So that's how I can understand.
Oh, there you go. But that makes it so you can be empathetic. And I think sometimes that's just what's lacking, like empathy and compassion. And I don't want to bang on about it, but, being able to relate to something that someone's going through, even if you haven't been through it exactly, like being able to have that empathetic conversation, being able to show them compassion, to be like, all right, I know you're having like a challenging day, like go hang out and we'll clean the rig, and just being able to like manipulate things in that way to be able to cut them some slack.
So I do think that's super important, and I think about some of the lieutenants I've had who really good lieutenants, but you couldn't talk to them about anything. Like they were so hard nosed. It was like you wouldn't go to them. Yeah. And there has to be somebody in your department or somebody in your crew or somebody who's understanding. And maybe that was an old school thing, and it probably was. We're getting a little better as we get older, or as we're, it's 2023 now. Mental health is finally starting to get part of its due. So people don't struggle as much. Yeah. But I can't imagine, going to anybody when I was a young firefighter. Yeah. Like there wasn't a guy.
And is that something that's kind of really shaped the way that you are as a lieutenant now?
Probably. I mean, I see people struggle, and I'm not even talking about firefighters, just people in general. Like, I think I told you about, my family and some of the things that have happened have bothered me. And, I don't know. I just don't look at myself as a boss. I look at myself as a friend to everybody, or at least I try to be that. Yeah. I don't look at you. If I tell you got to do something in the capacity of our job, well, there is a hierarchy there. Yeah. But outside of that, or those specific things, I don't know. I just care. I just want people to be happy. I want their lives to go well. I want to make sure they're safe. They're not, I'm not putting them in a bad position. Like all these little things that I guess maybe you don't think of when you're a younger guy. Yeah. That come into play as you become a lieutenant, and then as you grow as one too. Because I don't think the same way I did my first year. Yeah. I learned a lot. I learned from experience. I don't learn from as well from books. I think a lot of us firefighters like that.
I was going to say, I'd say that's probably pretty common.
We're all flunkies. Yeah.
There's more water there if you want it. what was I going to say? So, and I was talking to someone who sort of ended up in a like a supervisory role, and she was talking about the fact that, like you're saying, you know, you think differently sort of now as a lieutenant, as, you know, maybe you did in the past, but is that also something maybe that like you struggle with in terms of, you know, you have to quote unquote run into a burning building and do this and do that? Is that also sort of maybe like an aspect that can be really challenging? So you're like, okay, so well, not only like I having to like do that to myself, but I'm also having to decide who comes in with me, who stays on the truck doing the water, or, you know, whatever roles you guys are performing. Like, is that sort of like an element of that is like weighs sort of heavily on you, or is it something you don't really think about and you just like,
oh no, it's definitely something I think about. Look, at everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, so it depends on who you're working with and what positions they're in. If you know what they're good at and what they're not good at,
that helps.
it certainly helps. And look, at every fire is different, and every incident is different. They have their own things. You just try to put people in their strengths, and but there's times where I can't do something that I want to do because of who I'm with, and I do think about it, like am I going to put somebody on the top of a roof of a burning building when this house is gone anyway, just so I can no, or at least I think about it. I don't just automatically go by the book. I'm not like, okay, it's this, and this. Safety is humongous for us. And the last thing anybody ever wants to happen is somebody get hurt or worse.
100%.
Sometimes you can't help it. I mean, things happen fast on scene. So you're always thinking, constantly thinking about that.
Yeah. No, and I think that's super common too. Like, you know, my husband's spoken to me about that, about like knowing each of your crew and then knowing what they're good at and knowing their strengths and weaknesses. And it's not, to their detriment, but it's in just kind of going like, I know this person will like follow me off the edge of a fucking cliff. So if like shit's going down, that person's with me.
Those people are great.
Yeah. And
it's like any other job. Like you have your people who are good and some that just, it's just a job or they don't pay much attention to it, or they're only coming in, and that's fine. I don't,
for the paycheck,
that doesn't bother me either. Like everybody has their reason for doing it.
Yeah.
But you have to understand how they are and what they are, and still try to keep them out of harm's way, even though
and it's and especially sort of like from like a spouse sense, like you want to be able to, even though like you might be like in the position of authority as is like my husband on his crew, like you still want to know the people that they work with and have like a level of trust in them, because you're kind of like, well, there may come a day where like you're part of the reason as to whether my husband's going to come home at the end of the day or not. Like, and that's, and I think it's just not like getting to know them overly well, but, I think wanting to have that level of faith in them is,
I think you want to know the families. I love meeting the wives and the husbands and especially like the kids, and seeing, they come around and hang around the fire station or something like that stuff.
My kids walk into ours like they own the joint. So and some of my husband's crew are lovely and run around with them and do all that kind of thing. And
that stuff's awesome.
Yeah. And I think as well, like you said, all of your kids are grown up now, so it's probably nice to be able to see the little ones and then be like, okay, bye.
Good memories, hand them back. Right?
Exactly.
I like the firefighters who just have new babies. I can hold the new babies for a little bit and then hand them back when they start crying.
Exactly. Now, we sort of have briefly mentioned it, that where we actually met was on a CISM course. So for anyone listening, most of you will probably know what CISM is. So it stands for Critical Incident Stress Management. And that's even, I think, the colloquial term for it, because I think I don't even know what the acronym, it was like GRIN.
No, I don't
know. But so you've actually done like the whole gambit of the courses to be qualified, like for like the CISM. Correct. The CISM thing. So talk to me about what sort of what led you to go down that path to go and get those qualifications? Because I think it was like a suicidality class, and then like the critical incident stress management one.
Yeah, so that's really how it started, was with the suicide class that I took. And, I think most of us have been impacted by suicide somewhere along the line. If you haven't, God bless you, that's great.
Yeah.
But most of us have, as I have, as you have.
Yeah.
And it's bothersome. I don't like seeing it, but we're all human. We all have those thoughts. I mean, anybody's been through a depression,
yeah,
can understand. And you see other people go through that stuff. And mine, whether it was me, my sister had some problems. My daughter certainly had some problems, and I just wanted to learn more about it, which is why I got into it.
Yeah.
And it was a great class. And you're looking at all these people that are in there, and again, I tried to come in with an open mind and just tell people exactly, the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
And it helped me. It helped me learn. And it gave me a lot of respect for the guys doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
There's such a sadness in that area. Like to be able to help people over and over again on the same, not the same stuff, but it's just.
I think the same weighted stuff, like to be able to go and listen to and hold space for people's awful experiences.
Yeah.
And especially, I think the instructor that we had on our class, like he himself had such vast experience in like multiple facets of being a first responder, like, and then now he does this, like, it was.
Yeah, he was great.
He was awesome. I very much enjoyed his.
So you still need to take that suicide class, right?
I do.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's the conversation throughout the class, as long as it's an active class and people.
Yeah.
It was
open and
all over the place. Fantastic. You got, people didn't hold back on what they thought. Yeah. And we had, firefighters, police. We had a couple of priests. Corrections officers, just all over the place. And some people are very religious, some people aren't at all. And, we got into that conversation and we hit different perspectives. It was interesting. Like, how do you, some people would fall to that. Like, you have a suicide in your family.
Yeah.
Where do you fall on? Are you on this side? Are you on that side? Not that you're picking sides, but what helps you cope?
Yes, exactly. And that is something, because especially, which I think can be really challenging, especially someone from like the Catholic or Christian faith, that you are taught that suicide basically is a sin and that those people don't end up in heaven. And for anyone out there, I'm not like super churchy, but I grew up religious, so I know these things, and that was something that I found sort of super challenging growing up as a child, having like lost a parent to suicide when I was really young. Like, I think my mum put us into like church to have something else like as backbone and to probably give us like some kind of like coping skills and mechanisms and something to fall back on. But then I still really remember like asking the priest one day, well, my dad, died by suicide, so does that mean he's not in heaven? And like this poor priest, like I think I would have been like, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 or something like that.
I look at this poor little kid who's,
I know, but like it's more, I just kind of think like he just would have been like, oh fuck, like what do I tell this little kid who's asking me like this great big worldly question?
Of course he's in heaven.
I think he kind of deferred to, well, like there are exceptions. And I think he kind of went, I mean, honestly, I don't even really remember the answer. I just do remember like asking the question, because I'd pondered it for a really long time, kind of, because they used to have this like memorial book every year in like the church that you could put someone, that you lost in there, sort of thing. And like a big part of my childhood, like I used to obviously, spend a lot of time with like my grandparents, and my nana would take me into town on the train, and we'd go to this big, beautiful church in town. And there was a special little room that we would go, and the church was called St. Francis. It's in Lonsdale Street in Melbourne. And it had this like little room that we would go in, and it was just full of like candles. And you could go and you put like 20 cents in or like a quarter in, then you'd go and light a candle like in remembrance for someone. So like I always just remember doing that for my dad, and that was like, you know, like a nice thing that was associated with it and all that kind of thing. But so I really just went off on a tangent. I don't even know.
Let me add this, like, so you know, so that's helpful for you. Well, what about the guy who, you know, who lost his son, who was a year old, and he's like, well, fuck God, there is no God.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a God, how does something like this happen? He's like, so, you know, back off.
Yeah.
You know, this.
Yeah.
You just don't know where people are coming from, and you know, you have to try to determine that, or just play off of how, you know.
Yeah.
They tell you.
Exactly.
And who's right, who's wrong? Well, nobody's right and wrong. It's just these are the emotions we have, and you know, let's learn to deal with it the best we can.
Yeah.
What works for me isn't going to work for everybody.
And it's also such a suicide is such a challenging topic and subject and way to like lose someone, because a lot of the time you don't have any answers as to why you're left wondering, and there's I think a particular kind of grief associated with, you know, and I think you would have seen it. I mean, I'm sure you've, as a firefighter or, you know, EMT, like had to go to the jobs to try to save someone, or and I know I did, like, you know, and it's
to me, suicides are the worst. I hate them the most. I really dislike them. Whether it's because I've been, you know, I've had people in my life who've killed themselves. I had a really good friend, you know, and I was a firefighter at the time. Yeah. We played football. We grew up together. Yeah. You know, played for awesome dude. A little messed up, but you know, who is?
Aren't we all?
Yeah. And you know, the kid shot himself right between the eyes, and this is going to sound so stupid, but I was thankful that the cops in my hometown called me and let me go to the scene, where I guess most people wouldn't want to see that. But they let me in, they let me have my peace with them.
Yeah.
You know, whether you understand it or not, I understand it. Like, and I'll give you a little background about this kid. He didn't have the greatest upbringing. Mother was in jail. Okay. So he used to tell me, not all the time, but maybe once in a while we would talk, and he'd be like, I'm never going to go to jail. Okay. He's like, it's the last thing. I just won't. Yeah. Like, okay, you don't think much about it. Yeah. Well, you know, life happens, and then, you know, when you're done playing something you love, like I see how the people who have retired don't know where to turn and go through depressions. Yeah. Because I can relate it to when we stopped playing football with, you know, mid-30s. Yeah. A young 30s, but this is, you know, we've done it our whole lives. Yeah. Like, what do you do? There's no more excitement. Like, where do you get that from? Well, he got his excitement from like cocaine or, you know, drugs. Yeah. Ended up getting a bunch of DUIs. Well, he got arrested, was going to go to jail. Shit. Got bailed out and went home and killed himself. Because he just couldn't face that. Right. Now, this dude was a great guy. Yeah. You know, he could still be here today, you know, turn himself around or whatever. And you see other young people who do that, and it's just like, oh, man. Yeah. You know, why couldn't we get to this person? Yeah. You know, so then there's is there guilt from people, friends and family who are like, oh, I didn't see that. I should have saw it. I could have stopped this from happening. This is my fault. Yeah. You know, so there's that. It's a lot. It is. It is. And I'm sorry you lost your friend in that way. Yeah, it sounds like he was a good guy. He was. Yeah, he was great. And there's just, especially like that loss, it's so multifaceted. So like, I know from my perspective, and not to get too deep on you, but like growing, and I'm okay with it now, but it took me a really, like, you know, probably more than most of my life, that having lost a parent in that way for me personally, and I'm the youngest of 3 kids, so I'm sure my siblings dealt with it in different ways. I struggled with the thought that I wasn't worth sticking around for. Oh, terrible. And that was something that, like, I'm sorry you felt that bothered me for like a really long time. And even though like I felt like I'd processed like my dad's loss and all that kind of thing, like that feeling doesn't leave you. And it wasn't the fact that like my mom did like an amazing job, and she raised us in, like, she worked so hard and made sure we didn't, like, never went without anything. And so it wasn't
ever anything else to do with my childhood, but it was just very much that, like, and, you know, I did so much research and so much reading and, you know, trying to understand what goes through someone's head when they're in that space. And obviously a lot of it's, you know, they're in such psychological distress that they're not thinking rationally, and there are that aspect that, you know, you have to take on board, and I've learned that over time, but it took me so long, like probably well into my 30s to kind of
probably took you decades to think it through, and you know,
yeah, like I guess yeah,
especially when you're a kid and you,
or to like I identify that that's what it was that was bothering me. Right. And then that led into like so many other thoughts and feelings and actions and behaviors.
What's the suicide rate of a family member who has somebody who's already committed suicide? It's much higher. I can't give you the statistic, but yeah, we all know it is. Yeah. Yeah. Way higher.
Especially and then like being a child of one, definitely. And you know, like you said, you know, I don't think like necessarily everyone has ever had suicidal thoughts, but I think a lot of people will be on that spectrum of going through a really challenging time in their life, like a breakdown of a relationship, like, you know, trouble at work, like whatever. And it's not that I want to die, but it's like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore, or I would be okay if I didn't wake up tomorrow. That kind of like passive suicidality.
I think the majority of people have that or have gone through that. I mean, I would say the high majority have probably thought about it, not to the point where they were going to do it, but at least thought about it or had that, you know, go through their head.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's so sad. Like you see this, and it happens, unfortunately, but you see somebody who does commit suicide and then the family's behind, and how are they supposed to understand? Right. But if you're that person, have you ever felt truly worthless? Have you ever had a period in your life where you were like worthless, and that's how you felt? Like your manifestations, that person in your head that's talking has beat you down so much that you just, you know, you're doing everybody else a favor by doing like terrible place to be in. I only know because I've been there, and it's you know, awful. And I would not want anybody to feel that way, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But you look at it, and you know, we use your dad. Like, was he like that? And he probably thought he was doing everybody else the favor. Like, who knows? Yeah.
And that's, and I think that is something that not made me find peace with it, but, like from like the work I've done at the crisis counseling, suicide prevention organization, speaking to people there, and even like people that I interacted with as a police officer, like, you know, I attended lots of suicides, but also lots of, like attempts. And I remember talking to one guy in particular. I was like holding pressure over, like he tried to hang himself, and then the belt snapped and he fell like 6 feet onto like a concrete floor and smashed his fucking skull. And I remember, I was like, I'm just holding pressure on it. I'm like, I think I can see brain. This is really gross. But and just kind of like talking to him, trying to keep him conscious till like the ambos got there, and he was just like, I just think everyone would be better off. And he talked to me about the fact that he'd been renting hotel rooms like each weekend for like the last 2 months, planning to go and take his life in. And then every time he went to do it, he thought about the poor like cleaning staff or hotel manager who would find him. Right. And then he couldn't do that to them.
A thoughtful thing to think of. Like, here's a guy who's ready to end it all, but he's like, man, I'd hate to see this poor girl come in and see a dead dude.
Yeah. So, and you know, and I remember talking to him not as a police officer, because you can't communicate with someone in that instance like that. And I was just like, look, I can tell you from fucking experience, like, you will be missed. Every Christmas, every birthday, everything. Like, and I looked around, he's on like, you know, family photos and stuff around, and so, and I, you know, assume he got help. I don't know, I never saw him again, but
probably a good thing. Maybe he did get some help.
I don't know, hopefully. I'd like to think so. But yeah, it's just, I think it's so pervasive and I think highly misunderstood. Like you're saying, like, you know, a lot of the time that they're actually trying to be selfless and like everyone would be better off without me. Whereas I feel like there's a vast portion of society who may not actually have a lot of involvement with people who are struggling in that way. And it's always the dispersion cast is like, oh, fucking selfish. And it's so not.
I just had this conversation with somebody
really?
in a class who was like, you know, talking about that. Well, if they want to kill him, basically fuck him. You know, that's, I'm like, dude, you know,
yeah,
you're wrong.
You're entitled to your opinion, but you're wrong.
But here's why you're wrong. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, he was young. He was like, you know, he was 20. He probably grew up with, like, I grew up with my father, you know, always saying, you're a loser if you do that. Like, you never give up, which is great. It's good advice. You know, and as a father, you want to try and instill that in your kids.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Don't ever do this. However you want to bring that across. Maybe some is the right way, some is the wrong way. But,
yeah,
you know, it's a fear. As a parent, man, what a humongous fear. Probably the biggest fear I've ever had is that. Like, you know, is one of your kids going to kill yourself? Like, you see them depressed or you see them going through something, you're like, man, it's hard. Yeah.
And I think especially as well, like sometimes depending on what stage that child is at, you know, say like they're a teenager, like you might not be the one that they want to go to, like as in to reach out to for help. And
who goes to their parents to talk? I know some do.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in that. I don't even talk to them now.
But yeah, I mean, and that is like such a valid concern and such a fear that, I mean, my kids are little. I can't even I've kind of just gotten through that phase of like worrying about like SIDS or a SUDI death and like the, you know, the little bits and pieces that come along with that kind of thing. So you're way ahead of me in that respect. So
a little bit,
but
to go off of that, that's why I started taking those courses, because of my daughter who was, you know, suicidal, and this went on for years, and you know, still not completely out of it. I don't know when we will. She's still only 20 years old.
Yeah.
But boy, you talk about pressure. Like every day I would go to work, and at night I was, you know, if my phone rang, if I got a text message, immediately my heart jumped.
I was gonna say,
oh my God. And, you know, it can really change a person. I'm going to give you another incident that happened to a great guy, a super firefighter, awesome dude.
Yeah.
He had a call. We had a call. We were sitting at the station. Call for a hanging. You know, nobody likes that stuff.
No.
Well, they gave his address. You know, his wife and his daughter.
Oh.
And he's freaking out, you know, bawling over it. Well, the dispatchers got the wrong address.
Oh, my God.
Right? Now, just that one incident alone, I listened to your podcast or your thing yesterday about PTSD. You talk about PTSD. This kid ended up having to stop being a firefighter. You know, he quit. He's now doing something. He's very successful. He's doing his thing. And I'm just telling you, he was so great, and somebody you could rely on, and super good. And boy, did he really go down, you know, and I think it's because of that call. I think it had a humongous thing about it.
Oh my goodness.
Huge impact on him. Like he couldn't come to work anymore. He would come to work and he would be almost unbearable.
Just like on edge anger. Sort of thing.
So like something had to be done. Like that's how bad he got.
Yeah.
And it happened in an instant. Over something that could have been avoided, or, you know, people freak out. So I certainly don't blame the dispatchers. They just give the information that they got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just happened to be the wrong house. And boy, did it mess.
Yeah. And thank you for listening yesterday. I appreciate that. But so what Dave's talking about is on the Overwatch Collective app, I jump on every couple of weeks with a first responder therapist named Maggie, who's based out in California. We jump on and have a chat about various things. And yesterday we spoke about PTSD in the first responder population. And that's sort of so interesting because it was like what we were talking about, or one of the aspects we were talking about is the difference between, you know, being diagnosed with like PTSD, which I think I was looking up statistics, I think it's between like 6 and 8% of the population in America will have some kind of like a diagnosis like that. But then more common, especially amongst obviously like military veterans or first responder and emergency services, is complex PTSD, because it's like the cumulative effect of everything that you see and go through and you know, try to process. But like you're saying, like this guy was obviously so good at his job, and it was like that one incident that obviously there could have been other stuff, but like really just was like, I'm done.
Right. So in getting back to that, like that was my thing too. Like I started taking these classes because of my daughter, but one of my first calls was a hanging, and it was, I think I told this in class, which was the first time I had ever really mentioned it out loud.
Yeah.
To anybody.
Ever.
Yeah, right. No, but it was, oh my God, it was a terrible call. It was this poor kid, she was 19 years old, and her boyfriend had gone, they were fighting or they were breaking up or something. So he went to the house and he wouldn't walk in because as soon as you looked through the door, you could see she was dead. She'd hung herself from a banister.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was awful. And, these things affect you, certain things like, somebody had to call the parents. Be like, hey, I got to tell you, well, they happen to be on vacation in Maine, whether it was vacation or it was like, I got to tell you, one of the worst things that anyone's ever going to say to you.
Yeah.
And then you have
to get in the car and drive for hours. And
and it just, I think this one affected a lot of us because my chief now, me and him were partners on the ambulance at the time. Okay. I had forgotten that he was even with me on that
really?
call.
Yeah.
I was.
It's funny what part of jobs you remember and what you.
Right. But so you had that, and it was terrible. And then 20 years later, 19. Well, I have a little young blonde-headed girl who's going through mental illness who to her credit came out and told me that she was going to kill herself. Which can't be easy to say to somebody. No. But at least she did. And we got her help. But boy, I'm telling you, all these, my phone, even to this day, if I'm at work and I get a text message or a call and it's like 11 o'clock, a little bit of panic comes in.
Yeah. I mean, that couldn't have been an easy thing to hear either from your little girl.
No, it was awful. But, she's strong. She's getting through it.
Yeah. She's doing good.
She's doing good now.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Every time I feel like I say she's doing good, it's that roller coaster.
Yeah. But like you're saying, she reached out, and you were able to get her, services and stuff to try to help.
I credit her a lot because I wouldn't, to me, I wouldn't tell anybody that, and most of us guys and a lot of girls don't do that. So to me, that was courageous that she was able to do that, and it helped. And there were other indicators along the way, but you're a parent.
Yeah. Do you think it's part of it is also maybe like a generational thing too? That I feel like kids of this younger generation are maybe a little more, I sound really old as my late 30s self, but I don't think mental health was talked about even when I was sort of like going through high school and stuff.
Yeah, the kids will definitely talk about it. I memean, they're watching this stuff on social media and other things. So they will bring it up. Not everybody, but more.
I also think like they're a little more in tuned about it.
Totally.
And maybe a little more like sensitive to other people's struggles and to know themselves what they're going through.
Yeah, we're moving forward.
That's good. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah.
So you were, what was I going to say? With just like the CISM stuff. So was it just like the 2 classes in the end to get your qualification?
Yes.
It was.
Yeah, it was you needed the 2 separate classes. The first class I think was either 2 or 3 days, and the one we took was 3 days.
Yeah.
Learned a lot of good people in there.
Yeah.
Very informative.
I think everyone had a beautiful shared level of vulnerability in that class. And there were lots of different personalities and perspectives and experience. Like there was like a chief, like it was a fire chief in there. Yeah. There was a chaplain. Was he a priest or a chaplain?
He's a chaplain for Boston Fire.
Yeah.
Nice, good dude.
Yeah.
It was a good class.
Yeah.
For sure. And to be able to talk about whatever bothered you in front of other people.
Yeah.
I think,
and we didn't know anyone. Like,
right, but how do you become? If you want somebody to talk to you about your problems, you should know what that feels like. I think.
Yeah.
And I had never done that, so it was eye opening.
Yeah.
Made me feel a little better.
Yeah.
It helps with perspective. It helps with what other people like. I don't want to tell anybody my darkest secrets. Like, no.
Yeah.
God, that is really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people felt the same way in that class.
Yeah.
How did you feel? You didn't care. You're like, here it is.
I think, I mean, I tend to be, I don't think I like go out of my way to broadcast my own shit, but I'm generally comfortable to talk about it. So I think I would, typically find it a little bit easier. And like I worked on the crisis line. I, with my coaching, like it's,
Your background is definitely
different. And I sort of, it's going to sound really lame, so I can't believe I'm going to say it, but like, I feel like empathy is like my superpower. I think I can always find some way to connect with someone and be able to feel compassion and feel empathy like towards them. And that's sort of, as part of the reason of like why I do what I do. And I like focus that in the first responder community, because I haven't seen what you've seen. I haven't done what you've done, but I feel like I have a level of understanding, and that I can listen to anything that you have to say to me, and it's not going to like upset me, but I'm just going to be able to hold that space for you. And that's what I think is like really important. So
super important,
I think. Thank you.
And you're perceptive.
Annoyingly so at times.
It's the detective in you, I think.
But so I didn't find it. I mean, I guess like the part I found challenging was because I'm not a first responder anymore. I felt a little.
Once a first responder, always a first responder.
No, look, and I know that it was more. I just felt like an imposter's not like the right word, but I guess just being in that room full of all those people, like that more, I felt like a little more daunting. Like being in a room full of strangers, that was like daunting to me.
Well, that's always daunting, but the fact that, I mean, you did it for how many years? Like
I know, but
certainly imposter's not the right word.
No, I know, but I guess like just in these circumstances, it was just, and like I rocking up to something where you're in a class of like 50 people and you don't know anyone, and I always find that kind of shit daunting. Like,
I think we all do.
This isn't daunting. Like sitting down with one person and having a conversation. Like I mean, I love this, and I could talk your ear off all day if you'd let me. But, but so that was But no, I think I met like a lot of lovely people in that course, and I think it was like you're saying, like the group dynamics, and we had to go off into our separate little like dynamics and share those sorts of stories. And
right, you tell a story that's going to be bothersome to you while they evaluate it, or they
listen,
and this person will write notes and talk about
exactly
what you could do a little better, or what should have been brought up. And like, it was hard to do. So how do you reach somebody, like, yes, people are better about it now in this generation to do it, but there's still the majority who never taught. So how do you reach somebody who just doesn't wants to hold it all in? It's really difficult.
I think just
so from my perspective, I think it's by having people, whether they're lieutenants or they're in charge, doesn't really matter. Are they respected? It's having those people say, this is fine, you should this is
it's normal that you are bothered by this.
Yes, you should be bothered. Right, there's a lot of things you should be bothered by, but let's work at it so we can get past it and move on. How many people sit there and for years I don't know if they're just mad at themselves for something they think they didn't do right, or they could have done better, and they kind of hold that for so long.
Well, and that's what Maggie and I were talking about yesterday in our chat, and it was about like the shame and guilt that can come along with like certain jobs, and especially like if it was a really challenging job and you may have lost someone, and then you feel like fuck, like I either didn't do enough or I didn't do the right thing, or it makes it really I think really so you can it lingers with you a lot.
It can linger with you, and it can really bring you down. That shame and guilt is I don't know if it happens to everybody, but in the line of work that we do, you tell somebody who just got blown up on something. So I'll give you another example. We had a chemical explosion at a place, and we went in there, and I got in. We got me and my partner got the guy out, and we're working on him. He's talking to me, and I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna do fine, buddy. It's okay."
Yeah.
Now the guy died. But he was actually talking to me. He was in rough shape.
Yeah.
We med flighted him out and everything, but it's weird to have somebody sit there and you think he's going to be fine and good, and then you find out they died, and you're like, well, I was just talking to him. I'm like, dude, just keep, just breathe steady. Just, you're doing well. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then, I can see somebody feeling guilty about something like that and holding that like, oh man,
I'm feeling like you lied to that person
right,
in a fun moment. Yeah.
Like, wow, how could you do that? And then holding that for 20 years and just beating yourself up over it. That's a heavy lift. Yeah.
I think one thing I found as well that was sort of challenging as a police officer. So we would have to do, because like when you guys go to a job, it's just, you're kind of there for the time and then you leave, and then I don't know how often you hear about like the outcome, or
very rare.
So when you were a police officer back home, you would have to do what's called an inquest brief. So if someone died by suicide, they basically, if it was like an unexpected death in the state of Victoria, and there was like a whole list of criteria that meant that you had to perform an investigation. So like basically like a crime, but the person's dead, but it's not obviously suspected to be homicide because that's kicked up the chain pretty bloody quickly. But so all of the suicides that I attended, or overdoses or anything like that, then you would spend generally months then having to learn about that person, which was very strange and odd and
that's different.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, and like a challenging suicide that I had that was, very upsetting at the time. I then had to go, and I think both parent statements, so them sitting like we are right now and me at a computer, like typing what the words that they say, telling me their life story of their child who they've just lost. And I think both statements took 9 hours each. And then I had to get one from one girlfriend, and I had to get one from like the best friend, and you got to get the medical records and all that kind of thing. And so I learned about this person's life after I'd only like had an experience with them in death. And I even like remember like one of the friend, like the best friend or the girlfriend or something like that, had sort of told me about like this song, and that was their song, and it was something to do with the lyrics or whatever else. I think it was a Mumford and Sons song. And then for like years, I mean, I didn't know this person, but for years I would think about him and think about the way he died and think about that whole, situation. Every time I heard that song.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it's like fine, but it
sounds so easy, but when you're sitting there for hours and you're listening to a mom or a dad talk about their kid, and them themselves are going through such heartache and pain, but then they they remember when he was a baby who's like this, and then he was all these great things, and then it just gets into the bad stuff. That's a lot to hold.
And it's and that's like I'm saying, and then it's like I'm talking to them, and definitely for like a long time after that job, I felt a lot of like, I don't know if shame wasn't like the right word, but like I think a lot of guilt and a lot of grief because I couldn't save him. And I was always felt like if I'd gotten there faster, if I'd driven there quicker, if I knew the patch, because it wasn't our patch, and like the people whose response patch it was in, they were tied up with a job. So we were like 2 patches over.
You mentioned this yesterday, right?
Yeah.
I was listening going, you couldn't have got there faster. Yeah. It made a difference. But
and like logical Erin's brain knows that. But then when you are faced with trying to force entry to a vehicle to get this person out, and then he was like a very big dude. And there was just, we couldn't get him out. And it wasn't until the fireys rocked up that we could, and there was like it was 4 coppers on scene, and he was in like a car that like a coupe, like as in you have to push the seats forward to so it was just circumstances obviously just very, very challenging. And then even like the fireys got him out and tried, and that was, but then his mum rocked up on scene, and so then she was screaming at us like, you know, go and help him, go save my son, what are you doing? Like, yeah, so it was a very like challenging incident, and I don't know whether it was all of that combined, whether it was something where just, you know, and I hate to say it, but like so many times I could get called to a like 100% similar job, and it's bullshit. Person's like not there, like, oh yeah, no, I'm, you know, threatening like suicidality, but it was just like an
some
attention.
Calls are bullshit? Oh, I never would have thought.
Exactly. But you know, so I don't know, then like in my head I'm like, oh my god, like did I think that when I'm driving there, so I didn't go there with like the speed at which, you know,
just beating yourself up over it.
You know. And I know that, and
we all do it. Yeah,
and it's not like I think it's super common, and I think as you go along, certain things get easier to cope with and can be a little more like water off a duck's back. But I think just seeing people in like the rawness of their humanity and like their grief of losing a child, like I don't think that would ever leave you.
How could it? Because you can relate.
Well, I mean, I can now. At the time, it was just awful, but now, yeah.
I think when you can relate to somebody, and you know, as you get older, you learn how to relate to just about every incident because you've been around longer. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah. Exactly. So what do? You know, you compartmentalize. Do you find something else? Like some people
find a good outlet.
Drinking, drugs, you know.
Yeah.
Gambling, all that other stuff, which other people do anyway.
And as if you listened to me and Maggie yesterday, you would know that is maladaptive.
I did listen. I remember hearing that.
Exactly. No, I think that, look, I am a big believer in compartmentalization because I think to a certain degree is very healthy and necessary when you are in a first responder role, because otherwise one thing is going to get affected by the other, and I think there is a degree of healthiness that goes along with that, because I think you couldn't perform your role, but to a point.
You have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how, you're going to learn real fast.
Or you're
doing
not
CPR on somebody, like you said, with somebody screaming, "You're letting my husband die. What are you doing?" And then you're eating dinner 10 minutes later. Yeah. And then you're going to something else, to high school because of a stupid fire alarm and dealing with a kid. Like, it's just, you have to be able to compartmentalize. You got to be able to put that stuff in the back.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
easier said than done.
Yes, very much so. And then it is, but then like, even like Maggie and I were saying yesterday that like, but then if you're too numb, that in itself is it's normal for things to bother you. You do have to be able to manage like when it's appropriate to be able to deal with it, and when you just have to be like professional. And I think that was sort of like that real fine line that I always tried to maintain in my role, that didn't matter what was going on, I was professional at the time, in the place, in the moment, and then I gave myself permission to like fall apart when I got home. I had to pull in the driveway, I had to like walk in the door and like go jump in bed, like, and that was when it was like, I could like rip it off or release the valve or like whatever else, and that was when I allowed myself. But it wasn't
just bury it down and deep and and then 20 years later
and repress it, and no. But again, everyone copes differently, so
that professionalism that you're talking about too, when you're on a call, there's another side to that, and that's you can become so numb, as you said, where nothing bothers you, or you start joking. Like, I remember having a call, and this poor guy died, and his whole family's around there, and somebody had said a stupid comment, not in front of him, but
as in like someone on your crew.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't in front of them, but they were still there.
Yeah.
And it made, and then he kind of like chuckled over it. I'm like, dude,
what the fuck?
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, that was a conversation we had after. It's like, this, You will never do that. With somebody's worst day, something like this happens, and no.
Yeah.
You want to joke and have that document when we get back, and we
Yeah.
will.
Cool.
We absolutely
will. Of course.
Absolutely never on scene like that one irked me bad.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I don't think I'd like to see Angry Dave.
There is no Angry Dave.
Cross Dave. And probably like the last thing I was wanted to address with you was I know we'd sort of spoken about like now with like your CISM qualifications, all that kind of thing. There was like the Overwatch Collective had this thing called like the buddy program.
Yes.
And that was sort of like something that you were looking into and maybe hoping to apply for.
Yeah, the CISM program, it looked like our last day in that, it was more like a group thing where they'd bring a group of us in. I think me personally, I'm better one-on-one. Like I can just sit there and listen and take everything in and, understand.
Yeah.
I think I'm better one-on-one than I am.
Yeah. But like there was something you sort of mentioned to me like offline about it and I think you sort of also mentioned it while we've been chatting here today, that say you as like the position that you're in, you're like a senior firefighter, you're a lieutenant, so you're in a like leadership role. And like you're saying, you're the person that everyone comes to, that if they have an issue and all that sort of thing. But then I think you had sort of mentioned that like you look at it that who do you have to go to, or who do people in your role have to go to?
Right. And when you're in a position of power or leadership, and like, who do those guys and girls talk to? And right, the answer is nobody. And maybe they feel like they can't talk to somebody because they're in that position, like they should be above it, or they shouldn't be affected this way. And it's untrue. They're as affected as the rest of us. They can bottle it down, but it's still going to surface at times. And I don't know if there's somebody who does talk to those guys, a chief, a deputy chief, a sergeant, a lieutenant, whatever you want to call them. Look, to me, if you're a firefighter, a police officer, corrections officer, all these different things, paramedic, you're a leader. You're an alpha male or female in probably your whole entire life. Whether you're a lieutenant on your job doesn't matter, because you're probably that guy that people go to, or that girl that people go to talk to. Which is great, but you can have, over and over again, you're like, well, I can handle this, and that just weighs down on you. And imagine like going up and now you're 30 years and you're a chief and you have never really talked to anybody about it. Nor would you want to, I guess, because like from my perspective too, I don't want to tell people stuff. Certainly nobody I work with. People have different people they relate to.
Of course.
Some people would rather talk to a woman, some would rather talk to a man, some would rather talk to somebody in that leadership role or in a higher position. It's just, I don't know what they do. Maybe for most of them it doesn't bother them, but after taking that class and talking to that chief, there's just way too much. That stuff weighs you down.
And I think where you're coming from in regards to that, I think it's really wonderful, and positioning yourself in that place of like, if you are exactly as you just described, well then I can be that person for you. And I think it's a really like wonderful thing to do, and a wonderful space to like put yourself in, because it, like that's kind of your lived experience. So as well, like if you can help someone in a similar role or a similar experience,
so we can relate, and yet we don't know each other, so it's not like
I'm going to go and tell someone.
Somebody, and that gets back, because man, I'm sure the police stations are the same way, but the fire station, things get around
loose
fast.
lips sink ships. Exactly.
And people worry about that stuff, like,
of course.
If you're an outside person who doesn't really have anything to do with your town or your people, that's somebody you can unload on and feel pretty good about it, I think. So I'm going to help you submit that today. I appreciate it. Okay.
That's what you have young friends for, the internet stuff. All right. So I just kind of want to say thank you for coming over and having this conversation today. I really, really appreciated it. And I normally finish off these conversations. So the name of the podcast is I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And that kind of comes from my belief that an element of darkness, kind of like we've just spoken about for the past however long, like permeates all of our roles of being first responders. And, you know, like you said, we're often present for people's worst days and most tragic days of their life and stuff, and that sits with us and it resonates with us, and it's things that we carry. So I like to sort of finish it off with like 2 questions. And so the first question is, what do you do, Dave, to hold space for your darkness that you experience as a first responder?
Well, that's easy. I do lots of things. No, it's funny. I do have certain routines that I do that if I stop doing them, eventually I'll notice we're like, something's up. So and it's going to sound silly, but I'll tell you, I play Sudoku. I try to do it daily. Yeah. That's just a little thing. Yeah. I listen to teenage girl music, I guess, and I like to sing along.
You're a Tay-Tay fan, aren't you?
Listen, everyone makes fun of me for it, and I don't care because when they're listening, I see them singing along too.
Yeah. And I'm sure your daughter probably has a little bit of influence in that realm
realm
too.
Yeah, there might have been some influence there. I do that. I like golf. That's been pretty helpful. Plus the fact you can go out on a golf course and spend 4 hours with your friends and just kind of meander and talk about whatever you want. It's a great thing. It's worked for me. Yeah. But I also need like alone time. There are times I cannot deal with anybody. Yeah. I'm sure I'm a pain in the neck to, when I'm like that, maybe not, but at least I recognize it and I just leave me alone. Yep.
Yeah. And that's important, like to know that when you are in that mood, because if you are forcing it and forcing yourself to interact when you're like, I actually really need alone time, all it's going to do is cause conflict.
Yeah. Well, there are other things you can do, drugs and drinking and everything, but that doesn't necessarily work.
It probably doesn't end well.
As we found out from, numerous people, it's exactly. There's better ways to go about it. And look, I do think that you have to get in your own head and be more positive, because you have that inner voice. And if it's negative, like mine is super negative all the time, where I have to proactively change it and make it positive. Yeah. And so I try to do that every day. Non-negotiable. Like this is, because I'm prone to, go down that dark, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I think other people, whether they don't recognize that or they don't notice it, like you have to actively try to be more positive. It'll help you. Yeah. It helps everybody. Mind over matter on a lot of things.
Yeah. And I tend to agree. Like I think positivity is a choice. Like we all experience.
It's a good way to say it. It is a choice.
Yeah. We'll experience negative shit, and
like happiness. Kind of a choice, man. It's you can choose to be that way, and you can choose to continue to be negative. It's
there's like that with the glass half empty, glass half full kind of dichotomy and way of like looking at things.
It's funny. I saved this quote. You can make fun of me later for it, but it was about love, and I read it and I saved it, and it was just basically like love is a decision. You can decide to stay in love. Yeah. And that meant something to me, but I also think we can use it to this too. Like you can decide to stay positive. Like it's a decision. It's a choice.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
What's the second question?
You're like, I want to get past this love quote. So the second question is similar to just the first one, but it's, what is something that someone can do for you to help you hold space for your darkness, like, and support you in that realm of like the things you were just telling us about?
Yeah, maybe the best thing is when I need that alone time is just to really leave me alone.
I respect
and
it.
I'm lucky. My wife's great with that stuff. She no complaints. Yeah, she's been good. Yeah. I'm not one to ask people for things. I don't like to. It's not in my nature. So like something else, I guess, friends calling up, hey, you want to go golf? That's always a nice thing. Whether it's because they want to, they think you've been down in the dumps, or because they just want to golf. Doesn't matter.
You're like, I would be happy with either option.
Yeah, right. I mean, That's a good question. I guess I don't know what other people could do. I just would never think to ask somebody to do something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but
What are some of the answers you've gotten?
Similarly, yeah, just like holding space for you to talk if you want to. Might not be your number one option. Something that my girlfriend was talking to me about, Beta from one of our previous episodes, was like decision fatigue is like a really big one. And I don't know if that's something that you struggle with too, but it's like,
I wouldn't call it fatigue, but I am totally in tune with that. Like the guys or the girls will be like, "Hey, what do you want to do for you?" I don't care.
Yeah.
you pick the place. Like,
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So that was definitely something that like we've gotten, but I think being a spouse of a first responder and being able to recognize when they do need that space and when they need that solitary time, I think it is really important. And I think it's where a lot of first responder relationships can come unstuck. If like, you know, you're my husband and you come home and you are like, oh man, I just like need fucking half an hour, and I'm like trying to throw a kid at you or trying to like, you know, come fix this or whatever else. I think finding that balance can be like super important.
Yeah, for sure. But you know, the spouse has their problems too and their things. Like it's, you know, and if somebody's coming home and being, you know, every day, I need an hour. I'm like,
oh no, like 100% no. And that is where like that balance sort of comes into it. I think
balance and everything.
I think it's just about being mindful, and you know, I think so. Like little things I like to do for like my husband when he comes home from like a 24 is, you know, I might like I'll turn the sauna on for him so that he can come home and maybe take the kids to school and like jump in the sauna, or if it's like the weekend and I know it's been like super busy, like, you know, I'll go buy croissants like the day before and when he's on shift, and so make sure that like I make him a nice breakfast or something else like that. And then, you know, he might do like little things for me, you know, before he leaves work. Like he might, you know, put a mug out with like a tea bag in it, knowing that I'm going to have a cup of tea when I get up or something like that. So I think it's just like the little things that you do for each other that
little things add up, become meaningful.
Exactly. All right. I've probably taken up way too much of your time as it is. So I will let you go and I'll stop peppering you with questions.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for being so open and honest and sharing so much of your experiences and stuff with us. I think it's been really, really valid. And
if it can help one other person, you know, being open sometimes does that. So yeah, it's my new thing.
Your new thing. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Dave. This has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane. You will be able to find this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also videos on YouTube. All right. Thanks for your time. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.